Here's question number 14 on the Foundation non-calculator paper. Now this question occupies the whole page, so there's actually quite a lot of information here. And there's another page as well for working. The whole question is worth 6 marks. So let's look at what the question is asking us to do. Here is part of a bus timetable from Harrow to Cartbridge Street. So it goes from Harrow Lane to Cartbridge Street. So that's the bus timetable. A bus goes from Harrow to Cartbridge Street. The bus leaves Harrow Lane at 8:02. What time does the bus get to Cartbridge Street? So it leaves Harrow Lane. So there it is. There's that. Each one of these columns represents like a different bus leaving the station. So that bus there is leaving 8:02. When does it get to Cartbridge Street? 8:50. So that's a pretty straightforward one. It's only worth 1 mark, so that's a hint in terms of how straightforward it is. So it's just a write down question, reading it up from the table. Going on to part B. So if I just raise this upwards a bit so we could see part B. So here's part B. Here is part of a bus timetable from Cartbridge Street to Harrow Lane. So yeah, this is the opposite way. Okay, Cartbridge Street to Harrow Lane. A bus goes from Cartbridge Street to Harrow Lane. The bus leaves Hampden Road at that's 1:29, but it's 13:29, 1:39 p.m. Work out how many minutes this bus should take to go from Hampden Road to Elm Drive. So I need to look at one of these columns, and I need to find 13:29. And that's when the bus leaves Hampden Road. So along Hampden Road, 13:29. Here it is, 13:29. It leaves Hampden Road at 13:29, and they want to know how many minutes this bus should take to go from Hampden Road to Elm Drive. And here's Elm Drive there. So I want to know how many minutes it takes to go from Hampden Road to Elm Drive. So that's basically from 13:29 to 13:43. Now you could count that up. 13:29, well, that's 1 minute away from 13:30, so 1:30. So that's 1 minute. And then if I add 10 more minutes, that's going to be 13:40. And then add 3 more minutes, that'll take me to 13:43. So I need to add up all of those all together. 1 at 10 at 3 is 14, and that's going to be 14 minutes all together. Okay, so that's a neat way of breaking up that question into different sort of parts so that you could actually see what the total answer is and how you could arrive at it. So take your time with that, make sure you understand it. I'm going to go on to part C now, but I need to just move the paper across, so because part C is on a separate sheet. Here's part C, and move this down a bit. Okay, here we go. Peter lives in Harrow Lane. His grandmother lives in Swipe Crescent. Now, okay, just reading the question again. The question says Peter lives in Harrow Lane. His grandmother lives in Swipe Crescent. Peter visits his grandmother. He goes by bus from Harrow Lane to Swipe Crescent. Peter wants to have at least 3 hours with his grandmother. He needs to be back at Harrow Lane by 1600. Plan Peter's journey to visit his grandmother and get back home to Harrow Lane. You must include the times of the buses. And really importantly here, there's a star next to this question, so that means there's quality of written communication marks for this. Now, I'll need to go back to the table to see this, because in this question, he lives in Harrow Lane, he wants to go to Swipe Crescent, And the question says, plan his journey to visit his grandmother and get back home. Right, so what I want to do is to work out when he leaves home, or to say when he should leave home, when he's going to arrive at his at Swipe Crescent, and then what time he should leave, the bus that he leaves with, and what time he arrives, so the bus that brings him back. So if I look at the tables that they've provided, right, if he's going to leave in the morning from Harrow Lane and go to Swipe Crescent, where his grandmother lives, I'm going to say that he should leave as early as possible. He should leave at 8:02, and he's going to arrive at his grandmother's. He's going to arrive at Swipe Crescent at 8:41. So I'm going to write that down. So if I just leave this over here, so you could see that. Yep. So Peter should leave Harrow Lane at 8:02 or 08:02. He will arrive at Swipe Crescent at 8:41. Okay, so the bus is going to leave Harrow Lane at 8:08:02 and arrive at Swipe Crescent at 08:41. But he has to stay, or he wants to stay, at least 3 hours with at his grandmother's. So if he stays for 3 hours at his grandmother's, he needs to catch a bus back after. So if he arrives at his grandmother's at 8:41, 3 hours after that, so 3 hours after 8:41, 8, 9, 10, 11, so he needs to catch a bus back after 11:41. Okay, so he should leave Swipe Crescent at. Now I need to work this out, so I'm going to go back to the table. So I said he needs to leave his grandmother's after 11:41, but if I look over here, all these times, so that's 13:11, 14:14, and so on. So he could take any bus on this, because 11:41, after 11:41, he'd be at his grandmother's for 3 hours. So this basically means he could take any of these buses, right? Because like the bus that I see on the timetable here is 1:11. So I'm going to say he's going to take this bus. He should take this bus at 1:11. Well, not 1:11. He's going to leave Swipe Crescent at 1:20. So it's any of these buses along this line here. I'm going to choose this one. You could actually choose any bus there, because then he'd be leaving at after 3 hours. But I've just realized something. In the question it says he needs to be back at Harrow Lane by 1600. So if he needs to be back at Harrow Lane by 1600, that means it's not any of the buses he could take. He could actually can't take this bus here, because then he'd be back at Harrow Lane at 1653. So it's any of these three buses, so any of these three lines you could follow. And as I said, I'm going to choose the first one. If he leaves Swipe Crescent at 13:20, he's going to get to Harrow Lane at 13:53, and that's what I'm going to write down in my answer. He should leave Swipe Crescent at 13:20, and he will arrive at Harrow Lane at 13:53. Okay, so that gives me pretty much a complete answer to that. I'm just going to check to see if I've missed anything out. Nope, he doesn't. This is a fairly complete answer to this particular question. You need to give the timings. You need to give the fact that, right, he leaves Harrow Lane, he arrives at Swipe Crescent, he stays there for 3 hours, and then he leaves Swipe Crescent, he arrives at Harrow Lane. I'm actually going to put in an extra bit, right? This will allow him to arrive back at Harrow Lane by 1600. Okay, so that was the bit that I almost forgot. So there's a lot of stuff in this question. Make sure you understand it and make sure you could do it yourself.